Scientific methods have been used during the war to save life. And scientific methods have been used to destroy it. Scientists have designed new aircraft. And scientists have designed ways of shooting them down. Science has launched ships. And science has sunk them. And the atomic bomb, with its tremendous destructive force, helped to finish the war. Is this the birth of a new age? Will this atomic energy be used to give man a magical life of ease and comfort? But science is a very real part of our everyday life. Our cities have mechanical transport. Our buildings are served with telephones and gas, with radio and electricity. Let's see how just one of these things was built up: electricity. Just over 100 years ago, the first vital discoveries were made. An Italian, Alessandro Volta, found how to make a battery which produced enough electricity to use in experiments. Soon after, news came from Denmark of a discovery. Christian Ørsted had found that a compass needle would move away from the north when electricity passed near it. This may not seem very important, but all over the world, scientists were trying to find out something about the mysterious thing called electricity. Here at last was a real clue. For Ørsted, groping in the dark, with little knowledge and only crude apparatus, had discovered that electricity and magnetism were connected. He had also found a useful way of showing when the invisible electricity was flowing through a wire. Back in England, William Sturgeon heard of this. He took a bent iron bar and wound insulated wire around it. First, he made sure it wasn't magnetized, and then he switched on. The current of electricity turned the ordinary iron bar into a magnet, the first electromagnet. Electricity from Volta's battery held up the nails. Now that it was known that an electric current produces magnetism, Michael Faraday thought that a magnet should be able to produce a current of electricity, for he believed that all facts were part of one pattern of knowledge. Faraday tried all sorts of experiments, but there was no sign of the current of electricity. Then at last he tried moving a magnet. He put a bar magnet in a coil of insulated wire. Then, as he drew the end of the magnet out, or pushed it in, he watched his delicately suspended magnetic needle. It swung slowly over. But then it swung slowly back again. He was producing electricity, but only in a short spurt. Faraday had proved his point partly. A magnet could produce electricity. But he wanted a continuous current of electricity. So he had to think out a way of keeping the magnet or the wire continuously on the move. This is how he did it. He took a metal disc and fixed it up so that he could turn it continuously between the ends of the strongest magnet he could find. To the center of this simple copper disc, he connected a wire from his magnetic needle, which would show if a current passed. The other end of the wire was held against the outside of the disc. At last, between the center of the disc and its edge, and along the wire near the needle, there flowed electricity. No longer the short spurts, but a continuous current. Now he had proved his point completely. It is work such as Faraday's which makes science more than a number of unconnected facts and figures. For behind all his work was the belief that all aspects of nature are part of one pattern. Out of this belief and out of this work came more than scientific theory. Faraday had also given us the first electric generator. And so, from the continual groping for knowledge by men of different nations, there grew up the modern turbo generator and the modern power station. And not only these, but great factories where many people made still more generators and electrical machines. For science builds our world not only in laboratories. Many other skilled hands are now forming loops of wire and building electromagnets. From all this comes the modern world, with its electrical power changing the way we work and play, and even the way we live and think. And it all started 100 years ago with what scientists would call a piece of pure research, somebody working just for the love of finding things out. But science had to do more than create the modern world. Let's take one of the simplest human needs. This water wasn't always clean. It was flowing in a river only a few weeks ago, and if we had looked at it then under a microscope, science has the job of making such water safe and pleasant to drink. One way of doing this is beautifully simple. Most of the more dangerous microorganisms cannot live for long outside human bodies. So if the water is left for a while standing in an open reservoir, most of them die. But this isn't all the story. Scientists cannot just sit back and assume that everything will go on working perfectly. So every day, the water board men collect samples of water. Samples that are almost certain to be dirty, and samples that should be clean. For if scientists are to maintain the modern world, they must go round poking their nose in everywhere, always looking for trouble, even where everything seems perfect. In this laboratory, men and women find out if there is living matter in any of the samples of water. It would be difficult to be at all sure of seeing anything so small, so they have to make their search easier. They mix each sample with food and a dark coloring matter and keep it warm. Anything living in the water is then left to flourish until the next day. By the next morning, it will have given itself away. Look how the color in the nearest tube has faded. Something is living in it. There is some living matter in this sample of river water, but the drinking water is safe, so long as scientists are watching and testing everything. This is but one part of their day-to-day routine as they keep our world going. But we need other things besides water. We all have to eat, for one thing. Let's see what we find at one agricultural research station. Here, scientists use their knowledge of the various kinds of wheat in order to produce new kinds. They may want to obtain wheat that will give the best possible crop and will at the same time have a strong enough stalk to be harvested easily and rapidly by machines. So they crossbreed wheat with a strong stalk and wheat that gives a good crop. To control this breeding properly, the fertilization has to be done by hand. The wind would normally blow the pollen about and fertilize these plants. So the scientists make really certain of their facts by shutting up each head of wheat in a cellophane bag to prevent nature interfering with their experiments. Research like this is giving the farmer the chance to harvest better crops than ever before. Science is maintaining the modern world, a world it helped to build with its earlier researches. Every day we see around us the results of these researches and take them almost for granted. But that isn't all. Almost every day our newspapers have headlines about fresh discoveries opening up new horizons of knowledge and power. With radar we can see beyond the limits of sight or sound. Magical as this seems, its principle is not very difficult to understand. If this man shouts, the sound will echo back off the buildings.
Oi! Oi!
This can be timed.
Oi!
Now let's see this as a diagram. The speed at which sound travels is known. We timed the shout as it went out and came back. In 5 seconds, sound travels about 1 mile. So this shout traveled just under half a mile there and back. The buildings are therefore about 1/4 of a mile away. This is the principle of radar, the timing of an echo. But sound doesn't carry far enough and is too slow for, say, spotting aircraft. We must find something else. Wireless waves also give an echo, but look how much faster they travel. In 2 seconds, wireless waves could travel well beyond the moon. So if we want to time them in the split second they travel across the Earth, we need a new sort of clock. This cathode ray tube will measure millionths of a second. The gray circle is the end of the tube, and that's the face of our clock. The bright spot is the pointer. It can be moved by electricity at almost any speed, but when it is moving fast, it will look like a line. The spot can also be made to jump. We can arrange for a wireless receiver to make it do this as radio signals go out and as radio echoes are received. Now let's go back to the principle and try locating objects with wireless waves and the cathode ray tube, our new clock. First, we will adjust the speed of the spot so that it travels across the scale in exactly the same time that a wireless wave would take to go out 100 miles and return. Now let's see what happens in a split second. If a wireless signal is now sent out each time the spot starts, it will make the spot jump. If an aeroplane should come within range, the wave will be reflected back, rather like light from a mirror, and as the echo is received, there will be a second jump on the clock face. All this happens in a tiny fraction of... This aeroplane is now 90 miles away, and we can follow any change in its position. Wireless waves are not only giving us a new freedom for world travel, they are also opening up new worlds of knowledge. This is not magic. It is the hard-earned result of the work of teams of scientists. The long continuation of the work of scientists of all nations, the successors of Volta, Ørsted, and Faraday. We cannot say yet how this new power to see great distances will affect our lives. So let's take other achievements of science, the microscope and X-rays. Here we can follow up the way our lives have been affected by the power to see new worlds and the knowledge that comes from it. It was through a microscope that the scientists first saw these tiny black rods, the bacilli which sometimes breed in our lungs and cause tuberculosis. Even when they are hidden right inside our body, we can use another method of seeing, X-rays. With this apparatus, we can see if any parts of the lung have been attacked by the bacilli. Often, the people who are attacked will not know anything about it themselves. So, once again, we find scientists looking for trouble in order to help us. Thus, from the many healthy people whose lungs he examines, the doctor can sort out any who may have tuberculosis. The affected people can now be told that they are being attacked by the bacilli very often before the attack has become really dangerous. Only a few will need special treatment by surgeons and doctors. Others will be sent to a sanatorium in the country to get rest and fresh air. But most of them will overcome the attack without such treatment, simply by taking more care of themselves. Scientific apparatus and scientific methods are helping people to defeat the TB bacilli. But the bacilli are still with us. In spite of the achievements of the bacteriologists, the doctors and the surgeons, and the new researches of the chemists, there is still no certain cure. Something more must be done. Scientists find out a great deal by counting things. We can start counting people and see what we find out about tuberculosis. Recently, 10,903 people were X-rayed. 140 cases of TB were discovered. Only some of the TB cases needed treatment, but details of all the cases were taken down. The statisticians found out certain things. For example, out of the office workers earning below $350 a year, a proportion of 32 out of every 100 who had TB needed treatment. Out of those earning between $350 and $800, 21 out of every 100 cases needed treatment. Out of those earning over 800 who had TB, none in this particular sample needed treatment. These statistics showed that people who were poor were likely to have TB in a more serious form than those who were well off. Other surveys seem to show that the bacilli flourish both when people are overcrowded and when they are living in back-to-back houses. So it looks as if we can also help overcome the bacilli by raising the standard of living. We have now found that the solution of a medical problem is bound up not only with biological, medical, and even electrical research, but also with social research. The use of social sciences in step with physical sciences opens up new ways of winning our battles against evil things. Many problems of children can be dealt with by social science. Some children need the help of doctors with psychological training, called psychiatrists. This boy no longer talks to anyone and seems to have retired from the world around him. The psychiatrist will collect together medical facts. But not only will the boy himself be studied, but also his social life, the kind of home he comes from, and the sort of life he has been living. Then she can help him to face up to his problems. This child, whose home had been broken up by the war, had been very disturbed and unhappy. As he packs the toy furniture on a lorry, he works out the problems of his own broken home. He couldn't do this before, but with a happier and more secure background, he is able to face up to his difficulties and work them out in play. He's already become much happier. We too have to solve such problems in our home, the world. We will have to deal with personal problems and the problems of whole communities. But as we rebuild our broken world, we can use science to see that our homes have the fresh air and the quiet which factories used to take from them, and to see that people get the kind of work that suits them. These are but some of the many problems we can solve if we use medicine and psychiatry, architecture and engineering, economics and statistics, for the whole community has become wedded to science. We've seen how science has built the modern world. We've seen how science keeps it going. We've seen that science is expanding. We've seen, if we didn't know it before, that science has to do with people. But there is no magical solution of problems. In an age of wireless and of the atomic bomb, people are still living in overcrowded rooms, dreary rooms, hard and difficult to manage. People still die too soon because their homes have not enough fresh air. These are problems we have to deal with. These are some of the reasons why science is our concern. The details may sometimes be difficult, but the principles and outlook of science can be understood by all. How are we to understand it? How can each one of us become his own scientist? There are radio programs, there are films, and there are books on every subject in the world. We can go into our public library and ask the assistant to help us to find books on anything we may want to know more about. We can also look around by ourselves, and we can use the library's catalog. All this is worth the trouble, for we can see to it that scientists work for us, or we can leave the future of science to chance. But if we are to control what scientists do, we must know what is possible. We must take the trouble to understand the general principles of science. If we don't, our problem, but it is also our chance to use scientists to open up the greatest future men have ever imagined possible for ourselves and for our children.